Welcome to the third tenet in Operation HASTEN, which is to separate to the country. Operation HASTEN is really geared for leaders to help share the message of what needs to happen in order to hasten the Lord's return. There are many reasons why we need to separate ourselves to the country, why country living is important, and let's go through a few of those today. I think the first is that God has informed us that this is His plan, and many have taken that at face value. Others want to know why. Well, there's many reasons. One is to distance himself from unrest and destruction, right? And these are not in order of priority, but instead of just the less nuanced to the more nuanced. And we need to leave the cities because we're told they're going to be destroyed the same way that Sodom was destroyed. When we look at what's happening in the cities right now, it's absolute chaos and unrest. We read that at the same time anarchy is sweeping away the law, not only divine, but also human law. And when we read here that there's a spirit of unrest and riots and bloodshed that will involve the entire world in a struggle, we see this already happening. It's bizarre how we don't even notice how crazy it is around us. But as crazy it is now, understand that serious troubles are before us. It's going to get worse. And it's going to require a removal from the cities. Oh, that God's people had a sense of the impending destruction of thousands of cities, now almost given to idolatry. It's interesting seeing how cities are destroyed in many ways. Some cities are destroyed by wars, others by human elements. The time is near when large cities will be visited by the judgments of God, and in a little while, these cities will be terribly shaken and left in ruins. He will punish the cities and places where men have given themselves up to possession of satanic agencies. It's like a reminder of Lot, how, Lot was at risk of losing his own life by being in a place where God had pronounced a judgment. Right? We've already seen that God has pronounced a judgment on the cities. We need to get out of them. Satan's going to bring disease, disaster, until populous cities are reduced to ruin and desolation. So Lucifer wants this. Even now he's at work with accidents and calamities, tornadoes and hailstones. Right? So he's working with the weather. It reads right here. He's exercising the power that he has been allowed to have. And we've got to be out of areas where we're on his ground. We need to be fully on the ground of Christ. Ere long, there'll be such strife and confusion in the cities that those who wish to leave them will not be able. There's so many examples. Like we look back at COVID, right? COVID ultimately will be it's the same exact kind of overall concept between COVID and what's happening, what will be happening with the Sunday law. And there were points where people couldn't leave. It's going to be the same thing. So again, it's just a basic thing. We've seen it. It's like, it almost doesn't feel like we even need to be given this message anymore, and yet everyone's still in the cities, so here's the message. We also need to remove ourselves from any reliance on a supply chain. We've seen how bad this was, especially again, going back to COVID time, how a lot of the transportation was locked down. Now we're looking at saying, we need to stop shipping things because of global warming or whatever it is. And what this leaves is it leaves some pretty empty stocks rooms. Right? It leaves, ultimately a reliance on other people to give us food. But what happens when that's gone? We've seen this. But also imagine, even if the stores are stocked, if we can't buy or sell, like we read in Revelation, when no man can buy or sell unless they receive the mark of the beast, then how are we going to get food? So even if there are food in the stores, we're not going to be able to buy it. Again and again, the Lord has instructed that our people to take their families away from the cities and the country where they can raise their own provisions, self-reliance. In the future, the problem of buying and selling will be a very serious one. We should now begin to heed the instruction given us over and over again to get out of the cities and go in rural districts where the houses are not so closely together and you're free from the interference of your enemies. Number 3, freedom of conscience. It's so important to understand that our ability to follow what God has impressed upon our heart is going to be harder and harder to do in the days coming. We saw this with COVID. We even saw how our church didn't even stand up for freedom of conscience around things like vaccinations. It's just the truth. Well, imagine this church and state coming together and closer, and how if we are not directly in the cities, it won't be as impacted initially as much. We have to, through the fear and force, he has endeavored to rule the conscience. Right? So it's this idea that this is going to be impressed upon us, but this is not God's way. And so there's going to be an enforcement of human laws in defiance of God's law. And those who honor the biblical Sabbath will be denounced as enemies of law and order. It'll be much easier to keep the Sabbath if you're out in the countryside. It will be declared that men are offending God by the violation of the Sunday Sabbath, and that this sin has brought calamities which will not cease until Sunday observance is strictly enforced. Next is, by leaving the cities, we'll be more protected from temptation and perversion. While it's still on our phone, at least we won't be surrounded by it. We see what happens in these cities, how just they're literally engineered to hypnotize us, to tempt us. Life in the cities is false and artificial. The intense passion of money-getting, the world of excitement and pleasure-seeking, the thirst for display and luxury and extravagance, all are forces that with the masses of mankind are turning the mind from God's true purpose. Right? They're opening the door to thousands of evils. Right? Envy. You see people with, I want that bag, I want this thing, whatever it is. It's completely artificial. Just surrounded by drunkenness, perversion, numbness, becoming completely calloused by the people around, losing our empathy. What about gluttony? Right? Sometimes we don't think of this as the worst of the offenders, but if we really go into it, the gratification of this unnatural appetite has caused the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. And that gluttony, drunkenness, indulgence of appetite and passion were the foundation of all the sins. We got to get out of the city. We got to have natural appetites. Being in the country, growing our own food, it's so important. It's also important in mental and physical health. Right? What's the lifestyle associated with being in the city? It's very sedimentary. Right? It's not healthy. How can we hear the Holy Spirit leading when our minds are so clouded? It says, shut up within the four walls, often feel as they are prisoners in their own rooms. And when they look out a window, they see nothing but houses, houses, houses. The physical surroundings of the city are often a peril to health, with disease and impure water, impure food, and foul air. It was not God's purpose that people should be crowded into cities. They need to come closer to the harmony with God's original plan. The more favorable we will be our position to secure a healthy body, mind, and soul. If we want health, we got to get out of the cities. And yet, it feels like so many are accepting the path of the industrial complex and just absolutely given up in their jobs when they desire to be out in nature and they desire to garden and other things. It's interesting when we start to think about this idea that God did not design for us to see concrete and advertisements all day long. Right? He wants us to look up and see his creation and beauty. By beholding the scenes of nature, the works of the Creator, by studying God's handiwork, we will be changed into the same image. We won't even know it. It'll be imperceptible. And so again, it's so important that by beholding we become changed. If we're inside the city walls looking around, it's going to impact our physical and mental health. But what about our spiritual health? In harmony with the light given me, I'm urging people to come out. For those who remain in them unnecessarily do so at the peril of their own soul's salvation. Spiritual things are not valued and are not sought after. This whole idea of what we value. And by making a choice, by coming out of her, right? We see how God desired for Lot to come out of the cities. In fact, even sent angels, right? Angels of mercy hurried Lot and his wife and daughters by taking hold of their hands. Had Lot hastened as the Lord desired him to, his wife would not have become a pillar of salt. Lot had too much of a lingering spirit. Let us not be like him. How many of us are clinging to the city still, saying, well, a little bit longer, let me just, I got stuff here to do, I've got this, I got that. Come out. Trust in God. He has told you to leave. And by you staying in the city saying, well, because I got my job here, I got this, that, and the other thing, God will provide for you. You need to start making plans to leave. Had Lot hastened as the Lord desired him to do, his wife would not have been a pillar of salt. Again, Lot had too much of a lingering spirit. And yet we read that some will plead to remain in the cities, create any idea, any reason that they can to leave in the cities. It's not God's will. Instead of dwelling where only the works of men can be seen, where the sights and sounds of frequently suggest thoughts of evil, where turmoil and confusion bring weariness and disquietude, go where you can look upon the works of God, find rest of spirit in the beauty and quietude and the peace of nature. And let the eye rest on the green fields, the groves, and the hills. God knows what's best for us. He wants us to look up and into the blue sky, unobscured by the city's dust and smoke, and breathe the invigorating air of heaven. Wherefore come out from them, and be ye separate, say the Lord. Touch not the unclean thing. And here's a promise. He will receive you. So if we come out from the city, take a leap of faith, God will receive us. Now, will we go down in quality of life? Depends what you consider quality of life. Right? There is a level of work that you have to do by being in the country. But what we gain is everything. Instead of dwelling, right, we find spirit in the beauty and quietude of nature. We read this. We need a mindset shift, though. We need to educate people to get out of the cities and into the country where they can obtain a small piece of land and make a home for themselves and their children. This is what we told them. We were told to get a piece of land, a small piece of land even. You don't have to have a huge, massive piece of land. I'm on 2,000 square meters right here. It's barely enough time to keep up with it. You don't need hectares and hectares unless you can get it. Then great, but you don't need it to come out. Remember that God has our best interests in mind. He knows what we need. And he's already told us that you'll have a much more abundant life in the country. We need this mindset shift. We need to stop thinking, right, that it's a great deprivation to live in the city, in the country. Do not consider it such a hardship, she says, to go into the hills and mountains to seek retirement where you can be alone with God and learn of his will and way. She says again, here await rich blessings for those who grasp them by beholding the scenes of nature. And so again, we just see how in nature we are taught lessons of self-reliance and self-control. And I ask people, what is self-reliance to you? And most of them say, well, self-reliance is it's money. But let's do a quick little test. So you are out in the middle of the ocean, swimming. You know you can't swim forever. Your arms are getting tired. Do you want money with you? Do you want some gold coins in your pockets? No. What do you want? Money's worthless to you out there. What do you want? Well, you want an island. You want land. Right? When you think about it, it's the same situation. Here we are in the middle of this ocean. The things that we think we want are literally just weighing us down, so it's harder to swim. And yet what we need is land. It's called primary wealth. We all need to be more intelligent about what wealth is. People actually don't understand what wealth is. It just bothers me sometimes, but here it is. Primary wealth is a tangible asset. It's going to be anything from, your land. It's the soil on the land, right? It's the wood. It's the timber. It's having access to water. Those are the things that you need access to. And again, imagine it. You're out in the middle of the ocean, right? What do you want? You want land. Now you have land. Now what do you want? I want to be able to drink water. Okay, now I need some shade, right? Now I need to have good soil. Why? Because I want to grow food. This is the secondary wealth. Secondary wealth is actually using the trees to get a house, using the garden to get food, right? So we need secondary wealth, no question. But we shouldn't be getting secondary wealth without having primary wealth. Okay? And a lot of people think, well, no, I just need money, but that's intangible. Right? Tertiary wealth is what we have is called fiat currency right now. It means that it's just stuff that we have to make it easier to do what we used to do is bartering. But back in the day, the reason that we created currency was because one person said, "Hey, I'll trade you potatoes for that, whatever, that wheel, And they're like, "Well, I don't need any more potatoes. I have plenty of potatoes." And he's like, "Well, let me find, but my neighbor wants potatoes and he has something that I want, right?" And so he started doing these more complex barter schemes until it was like, "Hey, let's just assign a monetary value to things," and then we pass stuff around. But it had a tangible value, especially when you had like gold coins and things. What I'm saying now is that we're so far removed from that it feels like so many people are chasing something that doesn't exist. Like, oh, I got so much money in crypto. Who do you think created crypto? Right? Like you've got your money in a scheme created by the CIA. Like everything. Like you guys, you think I'm wrong? Look into it. The point simply is that like we hold on to something that has zero value as if I'm storing this thing up. I'm storing a bunch of pieces of paper up, or I'm storing a bunch of digital bytes up. What good is that going to do you? None. You've been tricked. All of you that are holding on to money, all of you that are and have no land, blows my mind. All of you that are like, I've got so much money in crypto. Yeah, well, do you have land? Okay. It's this idea that no, because what we're doing, we're renting land. Right? We're renting land and utilities. We're paying for water. We're then paying for food. And all of this money goes into the banks, goes into the pockets of bankers. It just blows my money. It blows my mind. It's just so silly how lied to we are and how dumb we are. That here we are, we're renting land instead of owning it. We're paying utilities instead of having a well. Right? We're buying food from the supermarket instead of having our own garden. And somehow we think that that's luxury or that's free. It's a siphon. It's literally a funnel, a way to funnel money into the super rich. You got to flip it back on its head. You got to come back to it. Get your land, right? Don't be focused even on right here. Get your land, right? Get your houses. Get your food. That's what we need to be focused on. If we have land, it says, educate people to get out of the cities into the country where they can obtain a small piece of land and make a home for themselves and their children. And fathers and mothers who possess a piece of land and a comfortable home are like kings and queens. If the land is cultivated, it will, with the blessing of God, provide for our necessities. We won't be on the supply chain. So many people right now are talking about things like, oh, we need a revolution. Bill Mollison said, the idea of revolutionaries without their own garden is futile because you're arguing against you're fighting against the same system that feeds you. I don't know how people, it's so bizarre to me how people are so asleep, but this is my last chance. This is, by the way, I'm not sure if anyone figured what this series is about. This is me giving a final warning and then I can move on with my life and do other things. It's just so bizarre to me that people don't seem to get this. And I am growing weary of giving this message. So yeah, this is it, guys. You got to focus on real assets, not on intangible wealth. And by the way, right, seek ye first the kingdom of God, and God will give all this stuff to you. It feels like we're chasing after stuff and not trusting in God. So if you have crypto, if you have fiat, convert it into a real asset. Get some land, get some house, and don't think about, oh, I get this huge thing. Start small. He that is faithful in small things is faithful in greater things. I've laid this out in previous seminars where I've shared that, look, if you just get a piece of land and then start working it, you can even have workshops there and have people come help you, do work bees, have people come help you get the land prepared, right? Get a small cabin built. And then you can take that small cabin and live in it while you're building a bigger cabin. Then now you can rent out the smaller cabin or even rent out the bigger cabin and build a bigger house, right? And it is this idea that you just keep kind of moving one step up. Look, if you can't afford any of that, get a van and convert it at a minimum, right? At a minimum, convert an old beat up van And it's something you can live in until you can get the next piece, But get out of the city, folks. It's over. God has surrounded us. God has surrounded us with nature's beauty and scenery to attract and interest the mind. It is his design that we should associate with the glories of nature with his character. If we faithfully study the book of nature, we will find that it's a fruitful source for contemplating the infinite love and power and source of God. So in every line of useful labor, in every association with life, he desires to find a lesson of divine truth. We shall ever be learning new lessons of heavenly truth and growing to the image of his purity. Now, I talked a lot about this idea of just kind of like, fending for ourselves and getting out of the cities we're told to, but what's the purpose of that? What's the end game? The end game is so we can actually develop a real relationship with Christ, so that we can, study the book of nature. This is the textbook of true education. It's kind of like if you want to, get a degree from a school, you have to show up at the school to get it, right? It's the same thing. If you want to get a degree from God, right? If you want to have a developed character, then you got to show up to the true education school. And the textbook is in nature. So if you're not living in the country, you actually aren't able to learn from God in the way that he desires on a deeper level. We've been told to do it. I know it seems like there's no path out. A lot of people say, well, I've been trying to get land, Rob. I've been looking for land for years. What's interesting is I was also looking for land and I couldn't find any. And as soon as I switched my focus from trying to have a homestead and hide out to saying, hey, I'm all in for whatever ministry comes my way, right? Land appeared. We actually have promises that say that we will get land for free or heavily discounted. But that means we have to go all in for God for this. We have to be saying that we'll use that land for him, and that's how we'll get it. So if our goal is to leave the city and go out in the country just so we can, have a better life, or if we're afraid of, being on the supply chain, if we're prepping, or if we're doomsday, right? It's the wrong motivation. It's not going to save us. But if the goal is saying, Lord, I know that you've told us to be out outside the city in the country. I want to be there. I want to hear your voice. I want to study from your lesson book. And if that's our motivation, see how quickly God opens up the path. The other piece is that I really do believe that we need to be thinking about new ways where we can come together. It's not feasible anymore for everyone to live in the country on their own. So I believe in Adventist intentional communities, and I'm going to be sharing some information about that. That's the next. I've told God, look, I want to share everything that it is you want me to say, and then I'm ready to do again. It's been about 7 years for me of just studying and researching, studying to show myself approved, and researching everything I needed to understand. And now I'm ready to do again. And so that's kind of where I'm getting into, is developing intentional communities. But really the whole point simply is, there's so much that it feels like we're just not connecting the dots on. And I feel like when we start to follow the Lord and do what he says, things become clear. And so I just challenge you to just take a step forward in faith. Understand this is the year. You gotta have plans to get out this year. If you're not in the country by next year, I'm pretty worried for where. And I'm talking by you probably have about a year to really get out of the city. There's and I don't know if you have that much time, but I think we do. But things are going to get crazy soon. They're already crazy. So yeah, don't get left without a chair when the music stops. Is the warning. It's not much more I can do. That's your warning, guys.